Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Holy Shed. Thank you for dropping by. And I hope that the new year is being kind to you. It's not an entirely kind world out there at the moment, is it? On all kinds of fronts. And maybe some of you have been affected by all the rain and the floods over the past week or so. I'm really sorry if you have. But hey, you're in a kind place here in the Holy Shed. So sit back and enjoy. Now, mentioning the weather, I guess most of us here in the UK are really pretty happy to see a change on that front. It may be colder, but I can't tell you what a therapy blue skies are for me. Well, to all of us, I guess. So I was thinking about that earlier and I decided to say something to God about it. Blue skies, one of your best creations, if you don't mind me saying, God. I mean, after umpteen decades on this incredible globe, I've pretty much come to terms with dense grey clouds. Well, on a good day. But hallelujah, I say, for blue skies and sunshine, especially in winter time, when we can go weeks wondering if someone switched off the lights. It's as if a weight lifts from the soul, waking up, opening the curtains and finding, yes, blue skies at last. Once I lay in the snow on Parliament Hill and just gazed at the deep, dazzling blueness above. I know you don't live up there, not exclusively anyway, but it felt as if the blue sky was you, smiling at me. Maybe this is why blue is most people's favourite colour, fact, because blue sky makes us smile on the inside. Alice Walker said it pisses you off when folk pass the colour purple in a field somewhere and don't notice it. Agreed. But who can walk under blue skies without noticing them and how that makes them feel? I love all the colours of the world. Red, yellow, green, purple. But like most other people, blue is my favourite, especially when it saturates the atmosphere like God. If there are others viewing us from space, this is what they see apparently, a shining blue planet smiling at them in the midst of otherwise dense darkness. There you go. Blue skies are awesome, don't you think? But dark night skies, they're awesome too, in a different kind of way, especially on one of those clear nights that I hope we're going to have quite a few of now, when masses of pinprick lights puncture the blackness of space. Well, it did inspire one of the most famous paintings in the world, didn't it? Starry Night, which is all very seasonal, given that yesterday, the 6th of January, was the Feast of Epiphany, when we traditionally retell the story of the Magi coming to visit the Christ child, those mysterious travellers from the East who visited the infant Jesus, probably Persian Zoroastrians, many people think, spiritual wisdom seekers, which rather wonderfully makes the birth of Christ a multi-faith event. I think that's something that is easily overlooked. We read about, in one of my favourite stories in Matthew, we read about that story in Matthew chapter 2. So I'd like just to pause for a moment, and rather than read the passage, some of us are much more visual anyway, I'd like to just show you a few images that I gathered together. Some of them are traditional pictures, others not so much, like look out for the three queens. Also a picture of a 3rd century funeral slab. 3rd century, bearing the image of the three visitors coming toward a mother with her child. And I put them all to the music of one of my favourite carols. Haunting music, indeed. Excellent. I hope you enjoyed that. And there's some great images, aren't there? I love the one of the three in a bed, and the angel just touching the forehead of one of them, and that Coptic one. The Coptic icon in their icons, they always have big eyes, beautiful big eyes, which is a symbol of watchfulness, of openness, and attentiveness. Um, and the one right at the end with the three women, that's lovely. I was going to tell you more about that, but don't think I've got the space. But that's actually that picture is from an illustration from a book, a children's book called Three Wise Women, and it's brilliant. Sufficient to say. Epiphany, that word epiphany, it means manifesting or revealing, uncovering. Interestingly, the Orthodox Church in the East often call Epiphany the Feast of Theophany. That's a Greek word which means God manifest. And it's a theological term that's often used in talking about those occasions in the Old Testament where God materialized in different forms, the burning bush, the cloud in the wilderness, the visitors who came to Abraham. And these are all seen as theophanies. But in a way, we could say that theophanies, which I think we can understand on a much broader base than just those stories in the Bible. And we could say that theophany means a case of mistaken identity. You thought this was one thing, but it's really something different. You thought this was just another burning bush in the wilderness, just another star in the sky, just another purple flower. But actually, it was God right there in a form that you didn't expect. I'd like to tell you a story which is related to us by a woman called Edwina Gately. You know her. If you've been round a bit, I've got books of her writings and poetry, and I've quoted her before. She's a Catholic lay worker and a very fine human being who worked for some time on the streets of Chicago helping homeless people and prostitutes. And she had a refuge where prostitutes and vulnerable women could come and have a safe place to be. And she speaks in her books about quite a lot of what you might call urban theophanies. Christ in down and outs and in women of the night, as they say. And she tells this amazing story about an old wino. She met him on the street, and she described him as being drunk as a skunk when she met him. Her spirituality led her to look for God in everyone, but she found Mark, this hobo on the streets, a particular challenge as far as that was concerned. Looking at him on the pavement, she said there was not a shred of revelation or glory or good news in anything about him. He was a write-off, past redemption, beyond the pale, so far as she could see. But she was, much too godly a woman to just be put off the track by those kind of reactions. She stuck with Mark and over the years got to know him and befriend him. She began to see something precious beneath the muck and rubbish of his exterior. Whenever Mark knew that Edwina was going out on the streets doing her work with the women, he would go to the Salvation Army and have a shower and a shave and get a change of clothes and go out with her, looking for all the world as if he were her appointed assistant. And after a while, Mark would also join Edwina on trips to a little Christian community in the countryside. And they went through this woodland area, and he loved the forest, he loved the birds and the animals, and he especially liked looking at the bugs crawling around. Mark the wino began to remind Edwina of St. Francis as she got to know him more. One day, walking through the forest, she noticed a table leg, as you do, sticking out from beneath the undergrowth at the side of the path. It'd probably been abandoned years ago and was now part of the countryside. It was overgrown with wild bushes and brambles, and all you could see is these couple of legs sticking up out of the greenery. But on those legs, she could see carvings like grapes and vine leaves, and she knew that once this must have been a beautiful piece of furniture. So Mark helped her pull the table out from beneath all the bushes and the brambles, and carried it to the garage. It was roughly painted, in red paint, and just looked a complete mess. It had been there for a long time and was being, as I say, taken over by nature. But Edwina, she liked the look of those legs and wanted to do something with it. I'll fix it, Mark said. And, with a piece of broken glass, he began to scrape and scrape and scrape. And beneath the red paint, there was green paint. And he kept on scraping. And beneath the green paint, there was brown paint. And he just kept on scraping and scraping. For 6 months, he scraped until one day, there it was, a beautiful antique oak carved table in all its original glory. And Mark stood proudly at the side of the table when Edwina came in, and she says she felt God say, "The table is Mark, and Mark is the table." It was like a parable, or a symbol, the one of the other. Both had kind of been redeemed out of, complete loss and degradation to become something. And, so, it was kind of a case of mistaken identities in both instances, really. You thought Mark was just another waster, that the table was just another bit of junk that had been abandoned. But, well, some years ago, I took the funeral of a guy called James, a man who had killed someone in his earlier life. But he'd suffered at the time from psychological disorder, so at his trial he was considered to have diminished responsibility and didn't have to go through the trial. So he was committed instead to a psychiatric hospital, which went really well for him. He made great progress, and eventually he was moved out of that sort of restricted environment to recover in a facility that was part of my parish in North London. And everyone there thought that James was doing great. But it was almost as if the better he became, the more that clashed with the actions he'd done before that tormented him. And, though he was doing great, there was another sort of level of narrative going on. So one day he walked out of the care home down to a tube station and threw himself in front of a train and sadly died. James' family had rejected him, from the beginning, following what happened and following his trial, despite the fact that he had mental illness and despite his deep, deep sorrow and remorse at what he'd done. Everybody in the family abandoned him, apart from his beautiful sister Karen. Actually, they were both adopted as babies, and so they weren't really biological siblings, but there was this lifelong deep bond between the two of them, and she had continued to go in there, week in, week out, whilst he was in the hospital, and and really cared for him. She saw something in him that clearly no one else in the family could see or was even interested in seeing. She saw a broken but beautiful man. Well, at the funeral, after speaking movingly about her brother, she asked that we would play a recording of Adele singing Bob Dylan's song, "Make You Feel My Love." Now, I have to tell you, mostly, I'm a professional. Mostly I manage to keep it together at funerals, no matter how emotional I may be feeling about the stories and things that are going on. But this time, I was in bits when the opening verse of that song began to play. When the rain is blowing in your face and the whole world is on your case, I could offer you a warm embrace to make you feel my love. I'm welling up now. I knew how true this song was of Karen's love for her brother and what that meant to him. She saw the oak table, shining and beautiful beneath all those layers of paint and the undergrowth that had got tangled into the whole thing. Apart from Karen and her partner, and one uncle who did turn up for the funeral, the folk who attended consisted really of a dozen or so care workers who had been involved with James after he came out of hospital. In the tea room at Golders Green Crematorium, not there anymore, but we sat around a table, this little company of us, sipping tea, munching sandwiches, as stories were told from all parts of the table, and tears were shed and laughter was shared over many memories of a lovely man who clearly discovered the wonder of grace through a family who could see, the beauty beneath that bashed up old table. I wept for James, a broken vision of divine grace. I also wept as we sat there for the family of his victim, and just felt again how wretchedly complicated life is. I marvelled afresh at the dedication and compassion of people in the NHS, and I delighted at this unconditional, beautiful love of a devoted sister for this broken man. The whole thing was, a deeply touching experience. I'm feeling it even now as I'm telling you the story. And the sad truth is, James mistook his own identity. He thought he was that, broken, messed up person who'd done an awful thing and wasn't able to see that actually beneath all of that there was something else, there was someone else. Karen saw it clearly. People who looked after him in the care home could see it, but he couldn't. And I was just thinking, it's exactly 10 years. I think it was on Friday. It's 10 years since I took the funeral of the legendary great train robber, Ronnie Biggs. He was a legend, the whole story was huge when I was growing up in the early 60s. And 1 year before I took Ronnie's funeral, I had buried his friend, Bruce Reynolds, who reputedly was the mastermind of the great train robbery in 1963. They were extraordinary funerals, very big gigs for me, and truthfully, I felt blessed to conduct them. The amount of press attention was just incredible. I don't usually get that for, Betty or Jim's funeral in Islington. There was huge attention. And as a result of that, there was quite a lot of media attention that I received. And there's an article, I think it was in The Guardian, it may have been The Independent, a double-page spread with a big picture of me. And it said, "The Villain's Vicar," which I was very happy with, thinking about the one I follow, who sat and ate and drank and became a friend of publicans and sinners and prostitutes and people who were on the edges of respectable society. No problem. But there were pious Christians who had a different take on the matter. And I had, emails and messages from people which, were saying something like, you're a disgrace. You're a disgrace to God. You're a disgrace to the church for taking the funerals of these unrepentant sinners. See? Well, I think that's another case of mistaken identity right there. They didn't know who Ronnie and Bruce became. Through taking those two funerals, I found out lots about those two men and how their life progressed. And I think calling them sinful scoundrels, as I was told, was definitely a case of mistaken identity. I believe God became very much a part of their lives in a quite explicit way in the case of Ronnie. After I'd taken his funeral and the news articles were out there about me, there was a woman who's a chaplain in the home where he spent his final days who contacted me to say, at some length, she told me how God had, really come into Ronnie's life and how Deep spirituality had emerged in him. So what a load of rot, huh? Just labeling people who you don't even know and you don't know anything about them, who they were or who they've become. Anyway, as you probably know, a few weeks after, because I've told this story before, a few weeks after the funeral, when I was taking Ronnie Big's granddaughter's baptism, one of the little spin-offs that came from it, little Lily, who's now a lovely, beautiful, grown-up teenager, at the baptism, I met Ian, who was one of the Hells Angels. There was I don't know, a dozen or so Hells Angels on their Harleys, leading the procession, the cortege for Ronnie Biggs, and so one of them, Ian, came to the baptism, and when we were sitting around having a meal afterwards, he said to me, "Hi, you've been getting threats, Dave, after taking Ronnie's funeral?" I said, No, not really threats. He said, "The boys weren't happy about that. If you get any more trouble, Dave, you just let me know." So I've kept that little calling card in my inside pocket, just in case one day. But hey, the challenge of this season of Epiphany, I think, is to see God where we least expect. I mean, that's what the Christmas story itself is about. The birth of Jesus in a shed somewhere. Maya Angelou says an epiphany is when the mind, the heart and the soul focus together and see an old thing in a new way. That's beautiful. See an old thing in a new way. We've probably all found ourselves falling into the trap of mistaken identity in people around us. Sometimes it's because people we really love, friends and loved ones, but we take them for granted and miss the beauty or the talent or what they have to offer us, which is staring us full in the face. But familiarity, if it doesn't breed contempt, it very often breeds a kind of apathy or an inability to see what is right there in front of us. Other times, it may be because we've allowed our biases or prejudices to overcome our judgment, to become entrenched within us. The place to start, I think, with all of this thing about finding ourselves beyond the mistaken identities is to recognize actually how we misidentify ourselves, how we judge ourselves harshly, underrate or lose compassion for the most important person, which is you. The truth is, we've all got sides to us that feel abandoned, or that we feel we would be abandoned if folk knew who we really were. Most of us have got layers of paint, red, brown, whatever, that disguise or conceal who we really are. Life does that. But here's the fact. God looks at you and me and sees through all of that paint and undergrowth and mess the wonderful oak table which is there within. I mean, regardless of how other people see us or how we see ourselves, that's, I think, what God is about. That seeing eye, the eye of compassion, the eye of truth that sees what we really are and who we can be. So forget the layers of paint. Forget the weeds and the undergrowth that we get tangled in. You, dear friend, dear shedster, are beloved of God. Please believe that. It's an epiphany that will change your life if you embrace it. So, as we edge our way into 2024, let's make this our resolve, to stop believing the inner critic that can be so vocal, that we stop believing the voices of those we think disapprove or judge us, because that doesn't matter. Let's start to see ourselves, or open ourselves to the possibility of seeing ourselves as God sees us, as beloved. As beloved. And that's one of the Epiphany stories where God said to Jesus, "You are my beloved." And I don't think that was a voice that simply spoke to Jesus. It's a voice that speaks to all of us, to me, to you, beloved. Let's have a prayer. Another one. maker of beaming buttercups and all things wild and wonderful, may we learn to stand tall, never apologizing for who we are, but glowing in the beauty and assurance that all we need to do is just be. Amen. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm very happy to drink to that. And whatever you've got, if you've got a drink with you, whatever's in it, then I ask you to raise a mug or glass or whatever it is with me now. And let's toast epiphanies, not just that one historical one in the story, but the epiphanies that are all about us all the time. A toast to epiphanies, to seeing things as they really are, seeing people as they are, seeing who we are in the sight of God, precious, beloved, to life, L'chaim. Well, thank you very much for being with me, guys. It's been lovely. And if you like what I'm doing here in the shed, guess what? You can support us. You can buy us a coffee. You just need to follow the link on the screen, and the rest is very easy. And a million thanks to all those of you who support us and have supported in the past in this way and lots of other ways too. It's really much appreciated. Now, I've given you a couple of prayers tonight that I, have written, which are going to be in my new book coming out in this coming new year. And as I've been telling you, I'm leading a retreat on the subject of OMG, a Bad Christian's Book of Prayers, in March during Lent. And I'd love you to come and join me for that. There's going to be lots of opportunities to talk about these prayers, talk about prayer in general, to maybe write some of our own prayers. So, you just need to follow the link there, go to the Amadown site and see if that's something for you. I would love you to be there. Fantastic. So that's it for today. Thank you for being with me. Have a great week this week as you go into, hopefully, a nice blue sky week. But whatever the colour of the skies, have a good one. Be kind to the world. Be kind to people you meet. Be kind to yourselves. Stay human. And I'll see you soon. And I'll leave you with a blessing with some nice music.